Мгм. Доброго дня. Ми раді вітати всіх, хто доєднався до нас офлайн і дивиться попередню.
Welcome, everybody. We are happy to host today's talk together with our partners from Germany and France. My name is Nastya Karpichenko. I'm the manager of this charity foundation. I will brief you on our mission and what we are doing. The mission started on the 4th of May and we worked until the 10th of May in a number of Ukrainian regions. Once again, I would like to reiterate that the situation in Ukraine is not only about Bucha and Irpin and the Kiev region. It's important to talk about the whole territory of Ukraine. Previously, we focused our attention on Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Such monitoring missions were run in 2014, and we were monitoring the situation in the occupied territory there. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we expanded our focus, so the mission has also changed. We are now talking about other Ukrainian regions, including Transcarpathian region, not because it was occupied, but because the territory faces new challenges and an influx of the IDPs, people that have to be taken care of. This is the subject matter of today's talk. I would like to give the floor to Yulia Krasilnikova, who is the executive director of the East SOS Charitable Foundation. I will be brief. The consequences of what the Russian Federation has done here, they have wreaked havoc here, leading to catastrophic results. Perhaps we are not aware of the consequences. We will work with that for decades to come. So far, I would like to give the floor to Eugene. He'll be talking about the periods of occupation and about the war crimes committed in the territory of Ukraine. My name is Evgeny Vasiliev, and I am coordinating the monitoring mission. As it has been suggested, we used to work in the East, but now we have expanded our area of concern. And perhaps I will brief you on the settlements that we visited and what we registered and what we saw firsthand. Such a number of violations by the Russian Federation is something I had never expected over my 8-year experience. In every settlement we visited, the local population told us about the egregious facts of what the Russian army were committed in those areas. For example, the village of Yagin in the Chernihiv Oblast, the occupying force entered the settlement on the 25th of February and stayed there until the 31st of March. They set up checkpoints both on the ways in and out of the place. They were located in the school. They drove people into the cellar, forcing them to leave their houses. And in that cell of the house of the school, there were about 350 to 360 people that spent 27 days in such a prison because it was banned to move freely in the territory. They were sleeping while sitting. And of course, as far as the food concerns, they were fed once or twice a day. And what the occupying forces found in their houses, this was their food There were 10 people who died in that cellar, and it took some time for these people to be buried. I will not go into the details whether people were buried in the graveyards or elsewhere after their bodies were transported to the boiler room of that school. But we were told that the burial didn't take place right after people had died. After the Ukrainian army liberated the settlement, the relatives gave their permission for these bodies to be exhumated. 2 people were deported to Russia, to the medical facilities. People were also forced to go to Belarus. We were in another place in the Chernihiv region where we talked to the physicians there. And that building was fired at and destroyed by the Russian tanks. They were trying to keep working. There were 60 patients with the medical staff. And of course, it was heinous picture to see and to experience. People were facing constant threats. The checkpoint was set up nearby. The Russians didn't enter the hospital because they were afraid by the fact that the hospital itself was near the wood. People spent there more than a month. And over that time, 8 children were born in that cellar and 28 wounded personnel were treated. What saved that hospital? They saw everything that was happening around. When they were approached by the tank, they went down to the cellar and the firing of that house at the near age began. We also visited, it was yesterday, the Kiev region, the village of Katyuzhanka. I'm confusing these names now, but the locals told us how the people were fired at and executed right in the street, people who were watching the column of tanks going in the direction of the capital city. In the village, they said, there were about 10 to 8 people that were killed. So far, there are not all data available, not all the places have been checked yet. That is to say, the Russian army in these settlements were occupying the sites which, according to the international law, must not be occupied. The weaponry were faced in near the people's houses, in their gardens, near the schools. People were forbidden from burying their dead, and of course they did not render any medical aid to the needy people. Going back to the village of Yahidna, there was a period when the Russians left, people were locked in the cellar and they were afraid to go out for 24 hours because they thought that Russians would come back. People are saying that they were afraid that this could be a repeat of the previous experience and they didn't want that to happen. And they only hoped for the Ukrainian army not to repeat that experience. Thank you. I would like to stress that the results of this humanitarian international mission will be presented in Berlin and in France due to our international friends. This is important. We believe it is paramount that are friends of Ukraine, should become the ambassadors of Ukraine to raise awareness abroad about the war crimes and the current humanitarian situation. The local people are saying that the volume of humanitarian aid is now decreasing, although the need for that is increasing. We think that our international partners will provide the dissemination of such information so that Ukraine is not forgotten. Yulia Krasilnikova, the executive director of the East SOS Charitable Foundation. You have heard about the instances of what happened during the occupation, and I will tell you about the consequences and the humanitarian need and the state in which people are now living in the places that were occupied or were in the area of hostilities. In many settlements, critical infrastructure has been ruined, damaged, or destroyed. For example, the Russian army exploded the bridges. It seems everything they saw in their way, everything was blown up. In the village of Kolochivka, in the outskirts of Chernihiv, and from the downtown Kiev, it takes 8 kilometers. Now it will take you 2.5 hours to get there, which is a disaster for the locals. Their life has been closely connected to the city nearby, and now it is very complex to go to the city of Chernihiv from those villages. Damaged have also been the gas lines. There are problems with delivery of water. The power stations have been destroyed, and currently, in many settlements, the delivery is not consistent. Railway stations in Trestenets and Artivka have been destroyed, leading to the difficulties for the movement of people. The passenger connection, railway connection, is not yet restored due to the fact that hospitals are not working, some facilities are not working, uh, um, shops are not available, neither are the drugstores, leading to the problems for the local population. Businesses and establishments have been damaged or ruined. As a result, there are many people who are staying there or who are coming back. They have lost their jobs and effectively don't have means for their living. They are in need of the humanitarian aid. Pillaged or damaged have been local communal facilities. The local government is doing all they can, but the occupiers have taken away the hardware and computers. It's difficult to provide the uninterrupted work. The everything that they had in schools and in kindergartens, such as computers and electronic boards, have been pillaged and taken away to Russia. As for the humanitarian aid, there is a growing need for that. There is a lack of such a aid. The flow of food has been decreased. The issue of pensions and social benefits have been restored so far. But there are people who have lost their jobs. They were not paid from the state budget. These people don't have any possibility of buying foods, of buying building materials to restore their damaged households. There are a lot of housing that has been damaged. For example, the outskirts of Chernihiv and the settlement of Novoselyivka has been ruined up to 80%. People must be resettled, and currently the administrations are thinking about and searching for the resources to build back better a new housing for the people temporarily in the first place. People are coming back, or there are people who didn't leave. They are housed with their neighbors or relatives, and they, of course, must go back to some kind of normality. There are commissions and committees working in the region, registering all the losses inflicted, but currently not all the damages have been registered, leading to the problems because people want to renovate their houses, to rebuild their houses, they want to clear up the debris, but they can't do that until these damages have been registered officially for a future compensation. This is where there is a lot of work to be done in the future. As for the medical services, in some settlements, the situation is dire. In Trostenets, there was a beautiful big hospital, including maternity, inpatient services, and Yevgen told us that it was fired at and destroyed by the close range by the Russian tanks. A lot of equipment has been damaged, and the physicians that are working there are not able to receive and provide services for the patients, outpatients or inpatients. There is not enough um, equipment. They are working as a outpatient station. In other areas, the medical points or outpatient service points have been damaged because the Russians destroyed those medical facilities and doctors cannot provide full scale of services. As for the education, I mentioned that school gardens and schools have been pillaged. These were the places where the Russian army were staying, and currently the local authorities are not sure whether they will be able to set up a teaching process until the 1st of September. As for the challenges for the local authorities and how effective they are in settling those issues, this will be the talk for the team Bose from the Deutsch-Russischer Austausch. As for the assessment and impressions of the conditions in the wartime and the local authorities functioning, I've got the impression that the reforms of decentralization is a very successful reform. We were talking to the heads of the local amalgamated communities in Sumy, Chernihiv, and Transcarpathian regions, including the Kiev Oblast. And we witnessed the fact that the local governments are playing a key role in the area of supporting the Ukrainian army, and they played a pivotal role in evacuating people. And it is interesting to see that as a result of this decentralization reform, there have been established informal ties between locals, the volunteers, and businesses that are miraculously working still, and they're in good contact with the local authorities. The challenges are big, they're daunting. In the Transcarpathian regions, there are communities where 25% are made up by the displaced persons that have to be provided with the housing, and also their children should go to school or kindergarten. They also must be fed, not all of them, because the people that are coming have some resources to keep on living. But in the west of Ukraine, the life seems to be kind of normal, but they will have to think what will life look like in the schools, in the kindergartens. So it means that the new opportunities will be provided for the people living in those areas. We are now seeing how humanitarian aid is delivered. It seems to be doing all right, but there is a lack of well-organized process of communicating with the local communities for them to be able to plan the process of helping the incoming people. That's why an important recommendation that we will share with our German friends is to restore the ties between the twin towns of Ukraine and Germany. That might be an effective and sustainable way to work in the future. In the east of Ukraine, situation is cardinally different. There is a need to restore and rebuild these ruined cities. And we've been impressed by the fact that the process is actually taking place. We saw the renovating work in progress. We saw the planning process. We saw how the public areas are now rebuilt and restored. We were talking to the activists from the local communities, and we understand that they must be supported with the building materials, for example, glass, because so many windows have been shattered. And another difficult issue we saw in Chernihiv, people voiced their grievances. When people are saying that people who have lost their housing, there's no clear way how to help them. We also communicated with and saw how the local business played a pivotal role and is still playing a key role in renovation and restoring. But the issue is how to help these particular people, how to set up a process of compensation for the local businesses who have helped so much and are still helping the Ukrainian armed forces, and they have lost a lot of resources. So this is an open question. I think that the international aid must be channeled in that area too. Thank you. Tim mentioned Transcarpathian region. Why did we choose that particular region for our focus? Yulia Shukan, a sociologist from France, will talk on that. I will try to speak in Ukrainian, and I'm sorry if it reminds you that this is my third foreign language. We also expected the situation in the city of Uzhhorod and in two local communities. The Transcarpathian region has been chosen because it is very attractive. It is relatively safe, and is close to the border with the EU countries. Transcarpathia is an exciting area because the load for the medical services, social services is very daunting. As of today, every third citizen of that area is a displaced person. Rather, every fifth person is a displaced person. This area has seen a number of waves, beginning with the Kiev region, then Kharkiv, and from Zhytomyr, then Odessa and Zaporizhia. Part of those displaced persons have now returned to their homes, and now they are hosting, in their majority, people from the east. People are now resettled in the private sector and, of course, in the communal facilities such as schools, kindergartens, and people are provided with food, which is free of charge, with the ability and access to shower and so on. The major challenge is faced by the local communities, the local government, as far as we could see in those areas that we had inspected. The communities are very much mobilized, teachers are participating, kindergarten officers and the staff of the village councils. But there is a lack of the mechanism of distribution between these local communities. There is some kind of imbalance situation. Some communities bear the brunt of hosting uh, IDPs, and the cooperation with the regional or oblast administration lacks some systemic nature. More often than not, it's a one-time uh, event or some measures. The local communities are gathering some money to host displaced persons. The local budgets that earmark some money for some renovation work or the development of the community are now very much strained. These monies have to be re-challenged. So we're talking about the cooperation between the local authorities and the local community. Some of the grievances we heard was that at some point the displaced persons would come back, and there is no feeling that some of these people don't have places to go to. They are probably to stay there. So there must be a more sustainable solution to the issue of the settlement of the IDPs. And also another issue is providing jobs for these people who are likely to stay. As for the local military administration, we were said that they don't see that the so-called module settlement is a long-term solution. They are thinking about some sustainable projects, building projects to provide housing for the displaced persons that will be used as tourist facilities after the war is over. I would also like to mention volunteers in the Transcarpathian region and elsewhere in Ukraine. We saw a powerful volunteer movement. Their resources are mobilized through their own money and resources, through their social contacts and networks. These resources are now being exhausted. So as for the food provision, clothing and medicines, including housing, are major challenges. Thank you, Yulia. To conclude, I would like to turn to Yulia Krasilnikova to draw the line under what we have been discussing and what the proposals would be, some of challenges that we will face in the future. The most important thing we heard in the places we visited is that people are coming back, they're ready to build back better, to ready to renovate their housing. The only thing they're afraid of, and something that Ukraine will not cope on its own, is to ensure that the war doesn't come back, does not repeat itself. It is important that the international community should continue its support, for this support to be increased and to increase the pressure on Russia in any way possible to support the Ukrainian armed forces. Because unfortunately, this is a daunting challenge that we will not cope on our own. No less important is for Ukraine to receive from partner countries is humanitarian aid per se, an aid that is decreasing now, including the resources to renovate and the maimed and damaged settlements, hope with the and help with the temporary housing, so that people who don't have something to return to should stay in the European countries for some time to come until their housing has been restored or their places are not safe. Let me remind you again, a detailed report on the results of this international monitoring mission, including the recommendations and proposals to the local communities and authorities, as well as international community. We will present that in France, in Germany, and in Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.